next up we have Vanstar Mining. Really looking forward to this one as well, because we're staying with the critical minerals theme. They're exploring pegmatites in Quebec, and first-time guest. I just read pegmatites in their press release. Really curious to learn more, though. But first time here at the Deutsche Goldmesse, JC, I really appreciate you coming. Please, the floor is yours. Go ahead and... no, I need to read up on that now.
Sorry, yeah. So Vanstar is a gold company, gold exploration company in northern Quebec. We have, I guess this is my, there we go. We have, I say that we're a low-risk exploration play, and the reason I say that is for a number of reasons. One, we have an interest in a large-scale gold project, world-class scale of a project, one of the larger gold projects in Quebec and in Canada, for that matter. And we're trading at a reasonably cheap value. We're less than $12 an ounce in the ground right now, and that's for a resource that is growing. We currently have a 5.5 million ounce resource, 5.6, and the limits of that deposit have not yet been fully defined. So it's still open in all directions, basically, and still growing at this point. The flagship, which is the Nelligan project, is in a joint venture which is fully carried to us. That means we don't have to spend any money to advance this project to get to production and to cash flow. That means no dilution for our shareholders. We basically let our joint venture partner, IAMGOLD, spend all of the money, advance the project, and carry us to cash flow. The company drilled, IAMGOLD drilled 10,000 meters this year, as they've been drilling pretty much every year for the past number of years. And we're expecting the same thing to happen again in this coming year. Beyond that, we have other exploration projects that we can spend money on if we choose to. We're also well capitalized and we're well financed. We have less than 60 million shares outstanding, and we have over $2 million in the bank still. And that, you know, given that IAMGOLD spends the money on the project, can sustain us for the next 4 years if we choose to. In terms of how we got here, Vanstar actually is who made the discovery of the Nelligan project. So we had 100% of that project back 10 plus years ago. And IAMGOLD came in at that time, and since then have been spending all of the money on this project to advance it. They published an initial resource back in 2019 at 3.2 million ounces, and that resource was updated earlier this year at 5.6 million. And like I said, it's still growing. In terms of the joint venture, I'll talk about this, I'll focus on this a little bit because it's important to understand the carried interest. What it means is no dilution to our shareholders. Like, unlike any other exploration company that has to raise money for drilling, raise money for prospecting, and again for resource calculations, and then metallurgy and so on, economic studies, and then capital and so on. These companies can end up with multiples of the number of shares outstanding that they started with. In theory, we could end up being in production with the same number of shares that we have out right now. So very important. These things don't come around often. The last carried interest I remember was back in the 90s. I'm not sure if there's any others out there. We are currently at 25% of this project. IAMGOLD can earn one last 5%, which would make us an 80-20 deal. They can do that by completing a bankable feasibility study. And once they do that, obviously they earn their interest. They would also have the ability to buy out our 20% interest. If they choose to do that, we'd appoint an independent evaluator who would determine the value of the project. IAMGOLD would pay that in cash or shares, whichever way we negotiated. And on top of that, would have to give us a 2% NSR on the entire project. We already have a 1% NSR on some of the claims. They cover about a third of the deposit right now. And the 2%, if they were to choose this option, would be payable on top of that. So overall, like, that would basically convert us into a cash-rich royalty company, effectively. But personally, I think that is not the way it's going to go in the future. Just if you think about it, this is a project that is going to be on the scale of $1 or $2 billion of capex. The NPV will be on the order of $1 to $2 billion. It means our interest will be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. We're currently trading at a $20 million Canadian market cap, so that gives you an idea of where we are. And then, so for IAMGOLD to take this option of buying out the 20% interest would cost them a lot more than if they just went in the market and offered us 100% premium today, for example. So I think the latter is a much more viable option. And then just on that front as well, you may think that, well, okay, we have a joint venture, IAMGOLD is the only potential buyer, and I don't think that's true at all. I don't think you'll see an Agnico or another bigger company want to buy a minority interest in a project, so that's true. But having said that, the fact that this is carried is very similar to a royalty in its own. So a royalty company might be interested in buying this. And I have had these kinds of discussions, and there is some interest there. So there's a possibility of creating some competitive tension there, between IAMGOLD and other potential suitors for our company. So, I don't think anyone has to sort of think that IAMGOLD doesn't have to do anything for years here, and this is dead money for a while. This is not the case at all. And I do think that this year is going to be a very important year, and for a few reasons. One is that, IAMGOLD has been building their Côté project in Ontario. That has cost them a lot of money. They had significant cost overruns developing that project. And as a result of that, over the last few years, they haven't been able to do anything else. Basically, they couldn't be seen to be distracted by doing, focusing on something else. Côté was the #1 thing. Despite that, they were still spending money on Nelligan for exploration. So it gives you a sense of how important it is to them. The fact that they were spending money at all is a good thing. And the only project that was getting exploration dollars was the Nelligan project. The fact that the Côté project is almost in production, they've announced that it's going to be, they're going to be pouring gold in the first quarter of this year. I think the closer they get to that, or once they're in production, they don't have those limits anymore about having to worry about being distracted by something else. So I think eyes will turn to this project and this company. So I think the next year here will be very important for Vanstar. In terms of the resource, there's a 5.6 million ounce resource at this point, at a 0.35 cutoff. The average grade is roughly 0.86. If you're worried about the grade, you can use a higher cutoff at a 0.5 cutoff. There's almost 5 million ounces there at over a gram. And no matter how you look at this, this is a fairly robust resource. There's 2.8 million ounces at over 1.6 grams, for example. So, and again, it is a project that's growing. In this slide, for example, in the top, or let's say the bottom photo there on the right, the black is effectively the pit shell for the resource calculation. The gray is the 2019 pit shell, so you get a sense of how much it grew in 2 years worth of drilling. But the black, whatever's inside of that black shell there is what is inside the resource, and everything you see outside of it is not included in the resource. That's all material we know is there. There are drill holes there that tell us it's there. That's why those blocks are there. And they're just the holes might just be too far apart to include that in the resource yet. So a few strategic holes here in between, a few infill holes here can add quite a bit of material into the resource here. And if you look at the amount of material that's outside that black area compared to what's inside it, you can see that the resource can grow significantly from where it is already. So I'm personally convinced that this project will be closer to 10 million ounces than 5 over the next year or two. And like I said, IAMGOLD did drill 10,000 meters this year, and the goal was to expand the resource. So, and part of it was doing these infill holes, and also a bit of exploration to the east. And I think over the next year they'll do the same thing. They're just putting their budgets together right now, and they'll be drilling to the west, and again trying to expand the resource. Just a quick overview of some of the results that we had earlier this year. This is in the eastern part of the deposit. The main deposit has some very wide zones, up to 100 meters in thickness, averaging about a gram. And in the east, you're getting different, the zones are getting a little more complex, but you're still getting some good grades and good intercepts. So it's very interesting on how the project is growing from here. And then this is really just to give you an idea of how much there is to go in terms of depth. The pit here is about 400 meters so far. It can go much deeper, and you can see why. Like if you look in the right image, for example, or either image, if you deepen that pit, you can see on the right side of the image, you're going to add a bit of waste to that. But on the left side of the image, you're capturing all these zones as you go down. And so the strip ratio doesn't really change much. So you can deepen this pit without increasing the strip ratio and still make this deposit economic. So there's lots of room to grow both on either side of the strike and also at depth. So like I say, growing deposit. I'll skip through this. This is really exploration just beyond the Nelligan project. On the property, there's potential to find another Nelligan on this project. So there are regional structures. Where you see these regional structures, you see them elsewhere on the property, and IAMGOLD is doing some exploration there to determine that as well. And then in terms of location, ideally located, we're about 60 kilometers south of the town of Chibougamau, which is a mining town historically. There are paved highways right to this project. It's about 700 kilometers from Montreal. We have access roads to the deposit. We can access it year-round. There are forestry roads that can handle heavy equipment. There's power lines, access to a workforce, electricity, railroads. Everything is here for a project. So in terms of CapEx, you're not in the middle of nowhere, and this is is going to be significant for the economics. I think that's pretty much my time, so I'll just leave it there. We do have other projects, but we're being careful with money. I think in many ways we have the luxury of being able to sit and do nothing while someone else spends the money on our project, and it creates value for us. So that's part of our strategy, and if we want to spend money in the other projects, we'll pick our timing. We don't have to go to the market anytime soon. If we see an opportunity, we may do it, but again, we're being careful with money and dilution. So I'll leave with that.
Fantastic. Awesome. Jesse, we have 1 or 2 minutes if you want for questions as well. And I have to admit, I was looking at the Amanda project. That's why I came up with the pegmatite.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was one of your most recent press releases.
That's true. Yeah.
What's your average burn rate? So you say you don't have to contribute any to the project.
Yes. Right, so burn rate without exploration is on the order of $500,000 a year. We could potentially bring that down a bit. Sometimes it's a bit higher, depends on how many of these conferences we do, for example.
We're not doing
and that's right. But yeah, about $500,000. So the money that we have can sustain us for 4 years if we want to, and potentially longer if we we don't have a high costs. I'm probably the biggest cost, and then if we choose to spend money on the other exploration projects, we can do that. But again, we want to be careful with that. So we're not going to spend high risk dollars on something to dilute a low risk project. Yeah. So.
JC, since I have you have a project in Quebec, and flow-through capital is a Canadian model, obviously, and the charity flow-through premiums are extremely high in Quebec.
That's right.
Just a general comment as well, like, are you looking at flow-through, and what's the flow-through situation right now? Because I know there's some tax changes coming in Canada next year. Is that any interest to you? Are you looking at flow-through, and what's changing? Yeah,
no, it is actually something that's available to us, so we could do that. So we are conscious of the market out there, and we know that the rules are changing a little bit. But having said that, it's still fairly good. Quebec is still the best jurisdiction in Canada to raise money for under that structure, especially the charity flow-through, where you can raise money at, let's say, 1.6 times, 1.6 premium to your share price, effectively, and maybe even 0.8, 1.8, depending on the time of the year. So that's still there, and we do get approached all the time. We just haven't pulled the trigger on anything, and like I said, we'll pick our timing on that. So when it's more advantageous to us and our shareholders.
Well, because premiums can go up to 100%, 110% in Quebec on the charity flow-through part.
That's right. Yeah. Well, for critical metals, they do. For gold, it's a little less than that, but it's still very significant.
Fantastic. Yeah. JC, I think that wraps it up.
Yep.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming out. And I'm just making sure we don't. Oh, we do have one question. Yeah.
Is there a timeline on the feasibility study for Nelligan?
I haven't seen one yet. They haven't told us. So I think what they're planning. This is what I think. So this is speculation a little bit, but it's a bit of an educated guess. I think they're going to do one more year of drilling because they want to get a sense of the scale of the deposit before they start economic studies. And I think with one more year, they'll do that, and they'll update the resource, and then they'll be able to start on economic studies. So whether that's a pre-feasibility study or they go straight to feasibility, I'm not sure, but they'll start economic studies, I think, within the next year. And like I said, as they get into production with Cote here, they're going to be spending a lot more time looking at this project, starting now, effectively. So.
Oh, one last question, then we're going to break for coffee. But Bukashi? Yeah.
Are the railroads that are going towards the north to Chapet and Chibougamau, are they operational?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. There's definitely one that is for sure. I'm not sure about the other ones, but yes, they are operational. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. We're breaking for 15 minutes to get some coffee, and then we'll be back here at 10:45 with another fantastic session. JC, thank you so much.